We want to get you now to Uvalde, Texas. Families of victims of the Robb Elementary School shooting are making an announcement on what is some 2 years since that deadly incident. Let's listen.
Who had not heard from their children, wondering, praying, hoping that they would be reunited. These families standing here, they were the last families standing nearly 2 years ago, and that's why they're standing again here. And consider the bravery of even coming to this place. Mass shootings are a very destructive thing. They destroy families, they destroy communities, they divide communities, they pit people against each other. But there's one thing that mass shootings create. Mass shootings create anniversaries. Mass shootings create anniversaries that are in themselves destructive. April 20th is an anniversary for parents and loved ones of the Columbine shooting. April 16th for the Virginia Tech shooting. July 20th, there's a new anniversary, the Aurora shooting. 12/14/12, an anniversary I know very well, happened in my home state of Connecticut, the Sandy Hook shooting, a new anniversary. June 12th, Pulse, and the families and friends of those people who died. October 1st, all those people killed in the Vegas shooting and injured who have to remember every year an anniversary they never wanted to celebrate. Santa Fe, May 18th, El Paso, August 3rd, Buffalo, May 14th, Highland Park, July 4th, Colorado Springs, November 19th, Uvalde, May 24th. You can say a lot of things about the law enforcement response in this case, and very few of them will be good. But one thing you can't say is that they caused this shooting. You cannot say they caused this shooting. What is enabling these school shooters, or any shooter? What is happening? These were the last lines of defense for these children, but they were failed long before the shooting. They're failed. We're failing children. Let me just mention some things about this, the law enforcement response. It was massive, and it was fairly quick. Within minutes, there were upwards of 100 cops there, or cops, law enforcement officers of many different stripes. The city of Uvalde was there. The county was there. The Department of Homeland Security was there. The Border Patrol was there. The state of Texas was there. The DPS was there. Marshals were there. DEA agents were there. Literally, if you can name an agency with a law enforcement, they were there. And at the end of the day, there were 376 law enforcements there. And what was this battle that they were fighting in this elementary school? It must have been a massive adversary of great numbers and great strength. But it wasn't. It was a kid. It was an adolescent. An adolescent who was a small, growing adolescent. If he weighed 140 pounds soaking wet, I'd be surprised. 376 at the end of the day to 1. 376 to 1. On paper, it should have been no contest. So what happened? But for 77 minutes, how did this kid hold back 376 heavily armed, trained law enforcement agents? Maybe it just turns out that if a kid has a military weapon, the AR-15, and get access to it easily, maybe it's just not that simple to stop a kid like that. Of course, they didn't give themselves a chance, these 376 officers. And by the way, let's be clear. Of the 376 officers, not all of them failed to do their job, okay? And there was a collective failure here. Consider that no disciplinary action has been taken, none, against any of these 376 officers. Think about that. One way of looking at that is cover up, right? And there's a lot of that going around. Have you noticed that everybody that talks about this from the government, what state or government, blames everybody else, right? The federal government came in here and they did a extensive investigation, but did they discipline any of their officers? Did they fire any of their officers? They laid blame at the feet of local law enforcement. And let's face it, there's plenty of blame to go around. The state of Texas, what have they done? A lot of talk, a lot of blame. What has the state of Texas done other than prevent these families from getting the information that they so deserve? And in terms of the state of Texas, isn't it something that you could demand for school safety drills and provide almost no financial or other resources to local agencies like Uvalde? Do you think the city of Uvalde has enough money or training or resources? Do you think they can hire the best of the best?
A somber press conference there as we listen to Josh Koskoff, who is a lawyer representing families of victims from the Robb Elementary School shooting. And essentially, he's announcing a settlement with the city and county of Uvalde, Texas, who will now each pay $2 million to those families. They were also announcing a new lawsuit against state law enforcement officers and the school district. We heard him there mention that as far as he is concerned, there's been no discipline taken against the 376 officers who responded to that scene some 2 years ago. He started by walking through previous mass shootings. He has previously won a settlement against Remington, the gun manufacturer, as it was connected to a previous mass shooting. But a somber day there in Uvalde.
Yeah. Friday marks 2 years since a teenage gunman shot and killed 19 fourth graders and 2 teachers at the school. One of the statements that we heard on announcing this settlement was that it was only $2 million because the city of Uvalde would go into bankruptcy if it was more than that. So in terms of dollars, that's just about $100K per family for the children who were